a Selkie in the sea, and when I'm far from land, my dwelling is in Selkies. Hello, welcome to the History and Folklore podcast, where we look at different folk beliefs through history and how these beliefs shape people's perceptions of nature. Today we're looking at Selkies and the mythology and folklore surrounding these creatures. In this episode, we are lucky to have special guest Dawn Nelson, also known as Dee Dee Storyteller, who will be telling us a wonderful story about the Selkie folk. If you enjoy it and would like to hear more of her work, she is on Facebook and Instagram as Dee Dee Storyteller. She also has a Patreon where, for a small amount each month, you can get access to nature stories, activities, printouts, colouring sheets, and other ways to rewild yourself through story. Her Patreon can be found at www.patreon.com/DD Storyteller. It is great value and I would highly recommend it. So on to the topic of Selkies. Selkies are seals who can transform into humans as they shed their outer seal skin. Across Scotland and Ireland, they are also known as Selkies or Selkies, all of which can translate simply to seal, implying that it is difficult to know which of the seals you encounter may be a Selkie. Possibly because of this, it was often considered bad luck to kill a seal. Sources vary with how often Selkies are able to transform, with some stories implying they could do this at will, with the Selkie changing into a human to communicate a message or to save a person and assist them back to dry land. Other stories claim that Selkies could only transform at specific times. The male Selkie in the ballad The Great Selkie of Selkies promised to return every 7 years, while in a story from Orkney, another male Selkie promised to return in human form on the 7th tide. The temperament of Selkies does seem to set them apart from other mythological sea folk such as mermaids, kelpies or sirens, who spend their time luring people into a watery grave. The majority of stories involving Selkies starts with them sunning themselves on rocks or dancing at night in secluded coves in their human form, far away from people. In these stories, it is generally humans that make first contact. A Selkie is attacked by a hunter, or a man spots them dancing in the moonlight and decides to steal one of their skins, forcing the Selkie to leave her home under the waves and marry him. Usually, the Selkie accepts her fate and becomes a dutiful and loving wife and mother, but never stops pining for the sea. She usually finds her sealskin by chance and immediately rushes away to the ocean, leaving her husband and children behind. A Selkie's story is particularly tragic, as almost from the moment her skin is taken, she is torn between her life as a seal, with the freedom that entails, and her life as a human, bound by the expectations of her domestic role as a wife and mother. In many of these stories, the Selkie and her human children are distraught at parting, but the Selkie cannot help but leave. In some tales, she returns to play with them as a seal on the shoreline, where the wilderness of nature and the ordered civilization of humans meet. The gentle nature of the Selkie is shown in this story by Dee Dee Storyteller, which covers 2 generations' experience with the Selkie folk.
Hello, Dee Dee here. The Selkie and the Fisherman is a well-known tale, which is often told in Celtic, Scandinavian and Inuit traditions. And this is my version of these tales and combines 2 stories, the seal catcher in the Selkies and the fisherman's wife. Come with me across the oceans to a tiny island. Here many people had once lived, or at least as many as an island could hold of that size. But now the resources were few and the fishing was scarce. And so there was only one fisherman left on the island. His was a lonely life, and he longed to share it with someone, but where would you find a woman that wanted to share such a life? He goes out to sea every day and catches what fish he can, herring, mackerel, sea bass if he's lucky, and then he sells them on to the mainland. The ferry comes each day to collect the catch, and at the end of each day the fisherman returns to his croft. He sits by the fire loaded with peats, and he takes a dram of whisky and remembers better times. Times when he would sit by the fire and his father would tell him a story. And this is the story his father used to tell him. His father was a seal catcher. He would hunt seals, skin them, and sell the furs and the meat. It made him a very good living. One day his father was hunting the seals on the East Beach. He had gone out very early in the morning and had watched the seals haul themselves up onto the rocks, and as he watched he saw an enormous bull seal sunning itself in the morning sun. He knew its pelt would fetch a fine price, and so crawling on his belly he pulled himself closer to where the seal lay. And when he got close enough, he took out his bone-handled hunting knife and plunged it deep into the seal's side. But the seal was big and strong and rose up and roared at him, throwing itself back into the sea as the waves crashed onto the beach. The seal disappeared under the waves along with the seal catcher's knife. "That's it," thought the seal catcher. "That's my livelihood gone. No longer can I hunt seals." But, as always, he did try to make the best of it, and he headed home on the lookout for perhaps a piece of animal bone or antler with which to make a new knife. As he was walking home, a man on a horse appeared on the path in front of him. It was a stranger. He seemed to have come from nowhere, and the seal catcher was confused because, as I said before, this was quite a remote island, even in the seal catcher's time, and there were no people on that island that he did not know. "Hi there," he says. "Have you come with the ferry?" "No," says the man. "I seek the seal catcher of this island." "Well, then you have found him." "Good. I need 20 furs by this evening," the man on the horse replies. Well, this is the deal of a lifetime for the seal catcher, and out of habit he reaches for his knife, but alas, he says, "I do not have my knife. This is an impossible task without my knife." "Have no fear," the man on the horse says. "I will take you to where there are many seals that do not need a knife to be caught." "Oh," says the seal catcher, "this sounds too good to be true," and so he goes with the stranger, who takes him to the West Beach, where they stand on the cliff and look down at the beach below. This is not a beach the seal catcher has hunted before, but as he looks down at the seals, he thinks they don't really look that much different to the ones on the East Beach. There were indeed many seals below, but he couldn't see how they could be caught either. And as he was about to say this, the stranger pushes him off the cliff and into the water. Down, down, down he falls through the salty water, the waves pushing him under over and over again, and the seal catcher feels he must surely drown. This is the end for the seal catcher as he falls deeper and deeper through the water. And it is then that he sees behind him a seal swimming. And when he looks into the eyes of that seal, he recognises them as those of the stranger that was on the cliff. He looks at himself too, and he sees that he too has changed. He now has flippers, and he finds he can hold his breath in the water with ease. Soon he finds himself in a city full of seal people, Selkie men and women. And they go into a grand hall, and he finds that he can talk to the seals, and he speaks their language. They offer him food and drink, and he takes it gladly, thinking this must surely be a dream. As he eats, they tell him the story of how one of their seal brothers is injured. He listens to the story with sympathy. But when they ask him for help, he does not see how he can help. "Come with us," they say, and they take him to a room where the injured seal lies. When he sees the seal, he recognises the hunting knife stuck in the seal's side, and he falls to his knees, sobbing and begging forgiveness, for he sees what he has done to this seal and his people. The other Selkies hurry around him and hug him with their flippers and nuzzle him with their soft noses against his skin to dry his tears, and they say, "You do not need forgiveness. You knew not what you did, but you know now. Now we ask that you give us your love and respect, and if you remove the knife, the injury will heal itself. For it was you that put it there, and it is you that can heal it." And so the seal catcher removes the knife, and the wound does indeed heal as if it was never there. He rejoices and celebrates with the seal people, who then guide him up to the ocean's surface once more where he then travels home to his wife and son. He tells his son of this story, and he tells him that this is why, from now on, we do not catch seals. We will be fishermen of this island, and we will only take what we need. Well, as I said, it is now that this fisherman, once the son of a seal catcher, looks into the fire and he is remembering this story. And he thinks of those Selkie men and women and how they offered his father love and kindness, comfort and companionship, and how he is the last of the fishermen on that isle. For he has no wife and he has no children. And it is as the fisherman is looking into the fire that he gets to thinking that maybe he should go and find one of these Selkie people that offered his father this love and respect. And so it is that he makes up his mind that the next day he's going to go down to the West Beach where he knows the Selkie folk are. And he gets up early in the morning and he sets off and goes down to that beach just as the sun is rising, its hazy corona hanging on the horizon, oozing pinks and oranges, purples and yellows into the morning sea. He walks down onto the beach and lies down so that he is hiding behind the dunes, and he waits. He waits for the Selkies. He does not have to wait long, for soon a group of seals come up and onto the beach. They shed their skins and leave them on the rocks so that they may dance and sing in the morning sun. They are the most beautiful, handsome humans he has ever seen. Ethereal, magical, beatific, the fisherman is transfixed. These are the Selkie people. The fisherman sees a Selkie woman whose smile lights up the beach, and he decides that she will be his wife. He is overcome with lust and the need to be with her, and he knows from the stories he has been told that if he takes her skin, she cannot return to the sea. And so he crawls slowly from behind the dunes until he gets to the rock where her skin lies, and he carefully reaches out and pulls the skin towards him. None of the Selkies see. He runs home and hides the skin beneath the floorboards before returning once more to the beach to claim his prize. He waits until the Selkies sing and dance no more and begin to return to the sea. He watches one by one as each one of the Selkies finds their skin, transforms and swims away. All that is, except one. And that is the Selkie woman he has chosen to be his wife. She stands on the beach, confused, afraid. She cannot find her skin. And it is then that she sees the fisherman watching. And she knows he has the skin. And so she looks him in the eye and she sings the Selkie song.
Selkie woman, here I stand, return the skin to me. I was never meant to stay on land, I must return to the sea.
The fisherman hears the sorrow in her song, but he does not care. You can sing to me as much as you like, but you will come home with me and you will be my wife. You will keep house for me, you will keep me company, you will comfort me, and we will love and respect each other. Well, of course, this was no way to start a marriage based on love and respect. And the Selkie woman knew that, but the fisherman, well, he was blind to it. What else could the Selkie do? She had no choice. He had her skin. And so she returned with him, hoping that maybe she would be able to find her skin one day and escape. The days rolled on, the months rolled on, and soon she found herself a good life. She was looked after well, and she kept house, and she did what she was asked, but she was missing something. She was missing her people. It was then that she discovered she was pregnant. And soon the Selkie and the fisherman had a family. And she forgot about that ache inside, for she had a son and a daughter to occupy her. And they made the hole that she had learnt to live around seem a lot smaller. Her children too were Selkies, as that's the way it goes, and her Selkie children often asked her what was wrong, as they could see the sorrow that dwelt in her heart. Not only that, but their smell was as good as a seal's, and they could smell that they were not like their father. And so they asked the questions, and their mother had to tell them of their family in the sea and her missing skin. She told them of how she sang to him and that their father would not listen and would not return her skin. "But mother," they said, "we know where your skin is. We have seen father with it. He keeps it under the floorboards." She could not believe it. "Show me," she said, "and I will take you to your grandparents. You will be reunited with your kin, and we will live as Selkie people." The children saw the joy in their mother's eyes, and so next time their father went out fishing, they showed her where the skin was, and together they returned to the West Beach. She showed her children how to summon their own skins, and together they disappeared into the waves, never to return. When the fisherman got home, he found his house empty once more, and he knew what his heart had always told him, that you cannot keep something that does not wish to be kept. And so that is the story of the Selkie and the fisherman. And so I shall leave you with this.
If sometimes you should find the seals they sing to you, well, they are Selkie men and women, and to the sea are true.
While the Selkies in this tale are gentle and do not retaliate to the violence and abduction inflicted on them or their people, other stories show that they can sometimes have limits to their kindness. One of the most famous Selkie stories, Kolpa Konan, comes from the Faroe Islands and tells of a man who married a Selkie woman after stealing her sealskin and locking it in a chest. One day he goes fishing and realises that he has left the chest key at home. When he returns, his wife and the sealskin is gone. A few years pass, and his wife appears to him in a dream, describing her seal son and husband, asking him to spare them on the seal hunt he is embarking on the next day. He does not, instead killing them and cutting off their fins to make a stew at home. The distraught Selkie visits again in the form of a troll, cursing the men from the island to drown at sea or fall from the cliffs, saying that the curse will only be lifted when there are enough dead to join hands around the island. Despite incidents like this, it is clear that Selkies and humans usually lived in relative harmony, with several families claiming Selkie ancestry. People who are descended from Selkies are said to be born either with webbed hands and feet, or with hard callus-like growths where the webs would otherwise be, which sometimes crack and give off a fishy smell. These growths can crop up in families generations later, and are sometimes so debilitating that the individual has to regularly file them down to be able to perform regular work. There are a number of theories about how Selkies came into being. Some tellers claim that Selkies are tragic creatures, doomed to live life as a seal for some grievous sin that they have committed. Others claim that they are members of the fairy realm, fallen angels who landed in the sea, while those who landed on land turned to fairies or elves. Another theory is that they are the souls of those who have died by drowning or by suicide. I quite like the last two explanations, because it is another potential example of fairies and other hidden folk being the souls of the dead that is often alluded to in Irish mythology and some interpretations of elves in Scandinavian folklore. One theory that I find particularly interesting on the origin of the Selkie myth is that it is not in fact part of Celtic folklore, as may be assumed for its significance in both Ireland and Scotland, but is in fact a story brought across by Norse settlers. This starts to make sense when you look at the specific locations the stories hail from: the west coast and the islands of Scotland, the east and northern coast of Ireland, as well as, occasionally, Iceland, Denmark and Sweden. It has been argued that the Selkie myth is connected to another story that hails from Scotland, that of the Finfolk. Like Selkies, the Finfolk are shapeshifters, but can change shape at will. They split their time between the underwater realm named Finfolkaheme and a magical vanishing island called Hildeland. Fin men were skilled sailors, able to sail boats unnaturally fast without the need for sails, and powerful sorcerers that can control the waves and weather and become invisible. Fin wives generally started their life as a mermaid, but became more haggard as their marriage to the Fin man continued. They too had magical abilities of fortune-telling and healing, and would often live quietly among humans to earn money doing these things, which she would then send to her husband under the waves. Unlike Selkies, the Finfolk were seen as temperamental and violent, and were known to smash fishing ships they believed were trespassing on their territory. It was said that people were frightened to speak negatively of the Finfolk, lest they hear, and would make the sign of the cross and throw offerings of silver to placate their anger at sea. Although the temperament of the Selkies and the Finfolk are very different, it has been argued that they are actually one and the same, and that their stories diverged through retellings and recordings by later folklorists based on half-remembered stories and snippets of information. In the original Gaelic stories, Selkies are apparently often referred to as Maiden Mara in Scotland and Maideen Mara in Ireland, which both mean sea maiden, and is a word used to describe mermaids, the apparent wives of the Finfolk. Even later sources conflate the two, with Francis James Child's translation of Grimm's Mythology 1 describing a Selkie story, but referring to the creature not as a Selkie, but as a Fin. The evidence becomes more compelling when looking at the attitudes that the Norwegians had towards their neighbours, the Sami, known by the Norwegians as Finns, who are the indigenous people of Norway. The cultures of these two peoples were incredibly different, with the Sami living nomadically and practicing an ancient pagan shamanic religion that was feared as powerful foreign sorcery by the Norwegians, especially after the latter were converted to Christianity. This perception was not helped by the fact that the Sami resided in an area of the north of Norway called Finnmark. In the minds of the Norwegians, the north was a place of danger, wildness and magic, and the people who lived there could not help but be shaped and affected by their environments. The attributes that the Norwegians attributed to the Sami can be seen in a number of sagas, and it was said that they could control the weather, shapeshift, especially into bears or sea creatures, sail at incredible speeds and distances across the ocean without a sail, could travel over land while in a trance, and had the power of divination and healing. They were so mistrusted that it was forbidden by law for a Norse Christian to seek out the Sami for medicine. It has been suggested that the Sami, or Finna, also journeyed across the North Sea, and may have arrived in the Northern Isles of Scotland prior to the invasion and settlement by the Norse. Certainly in the 1600s, there are a number of recorded accounts of people encountering Finn men on the shores of Orkney, and it has been suggested by Sigurd Tauri of Orkneyjar that these Finn men may have been Arctic Inuit who followed the ice flows that, at the time, stretched as far as Iceland. Like the Sami, they wore clothes made of sealskin and crossed the ocean in sealskin canoes, allowing them to magically cross water without a sail. Every 8 hours or so, the canoes would become waterlogged and would need to dry out, making it necessary for the canoer to paddle to land. Often by this point, the canoe would be slightly under the waterline, appearing like a tail to an observer. The person would then shed their sealskin canoe and clothing, leaving it on the shore to dry, and appear to an observer to transform from a seal into a human. These theories about the origin of the Selkie myth show how fascinating folklore can really be. What starts as a simple yet tragic story about a seal who transformed to a woman can give us an insight into attitudes about the wildness of nature, the confines of civilization, and the grey spaces in between. It can give glimpses into old prejudices and fears about foreigners, provide an origin story for a genetic skin issue, and show how oral history can transform into fantastical myth, while still acting as a window to actual events. Thank you for listening to this episode of the History and Folklore podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you didn't, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and follow me on Facebook at History and Folklore Podcast or Instagram at History and Folklore, where you can give feedback, be notified of future episodes, and also discover lots of strange and unusual history and folklore facts. You can also get in touch by emailing me at historyandfolklorepodcast@gmail.com. To find out more about DD Storyteller's work, her website is www.ddstoryteller.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you for the next episode.